Hey guys, Mr. Breen here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about elasticity of demand. I'm going to use the price of gasoline, a good that's near and dear to all of our hearts and that causes us lots of anger, as an example of elasticity, or the opposite. So I've these are just hypothetical, but let's say this is in the city of Dearborn or whatever. I don't know again how much gas each gas station sells in a day, but let's say this is Dearborn for a day. 10,750 gallons of gas they'll sell if the price is $3. If the price rises to $3.25 a gallon, they'll sell 10,500 gallons. If the price rises to $3.50, they'll sell 10,250. Now, hopefully you're noticing here, and it's common sense, that an increase in the price of gasoline will decrease the quantity demanded of gasoline. Remember, it doesn't change demand, just quantity demanded, but not by that much. Okay. For example, at $3, if you increase the price by 25 cents, which is an increase in price of roughly 8.3%. Okay. Now, I didn't need to get a calculator to do that because that's, I know that 25 cents is 1/12 of $3, and 1/12 is 8.3% or so. And then I do need a calculator for this next one, or I did calculate it before. It causes a 2.3% decrease in quantity demanded. Okay, so because this is less than 1, we're going to say that demand here is very inelastic. In fact, I could raise the price by 33%, all the way to $4. If I could raise the price to 33.3 repeating, okay, that's still going to only lower quantity demanded by around 9%, 9 point something percent. What all this means is that if I draw out my demand curve and I put price over on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis like a good econ, that means that my line will actually not look like the demand curves that I've been drawing in the past with a nice 45-degree angle sort of, hitting the axes. Instead, it's going to look more like that. It's going to be sort of horizontal, right? A big change in price will cause only small changes in quantity. To look at the opposite kind of situation, let's take cans of Coca-Cola. So at 25 cents, people will buy 20,000 cans, and at 50 cents, at a price of 50 cents per can, people will only buy 9,000, and then so on. So this is their demand. Remember, this increase in price isn't causing a change in demand, but it is causing a change in quantity demanded. So let's see what the elasticity of demand would be at $1. So at $1, if we increase the price by 25%, then we will decrease the quantity demanded by 1,000 divided by 3,500, which is what, 10 divided by 35, 2 divided by 7. That's, roughly 30%. Notice now this resulting number is greater than 1, so we're going to say that demand for Coca-Cola is elastic. At least it is at $1. If I were going to graph this out, again, this wouldn't look so much like my nice, neat 45-degree angle demand curve that I've been drawing before, but if I put price over there and quantity on the x-axis, it's going to look more like that. It's going to be more of a gradual curve. And it's going to look like that because a small change in price will cause a relatively large change in quantity demanded. So if the price goes up by a little bit, people will buy quite a bit less. So what is the definition of elasticity then? Elasticity is simply how sensitive consumers are to changes in price. If a good has elastic demand, that means that a change in price will have a large effect on quantity. A large effect on quantity. If demand is inelastic, then a change in price will have a relatively small effect on quantity. It won't have no effect on quantity. It will have some effect on quantity, but it will have a small effect on quantity. And if it's unit elastic, that means that the change in price will be exactly proportional. So if we take the percent change in price it will actually, and divide the percent change in quantity by it, that number will be 1. Now this is important for businesses because if demand for your good is inelastic at the current price, you want to raise the price because your total revenue will go up. Whereas if it's elastic at that price, you might want to lower the price. So what causes a good to have high elasticity or low elasticity of demand? Well, the first one is whether or not there's a readily available substitute. For Coca-Cola, you would expect that it would have a high elasticity of demand because there is a readily available substitute, like Pepsi. Okay, whereas for gas, there's not a readily available substitute, right? What can you put in your car? Well, if you try to put diesel fuel in there, it might run once, but it's not going to run again. So it doesn't have many available substitutes. And, in the Detroit area, instead of running your car, maybe you take public transportation, but in Detroit, the public transportation isn't very good. So public transportation isn't much of a substitute there. So the demand for gas is going to be relatively inelastic. Plus, Coca-Cola is really a luxury good, right? You don't need to have it, whereas for gasoline, a lot of people, like me, need it to get to work. So if something is a necessity, it's probably going to have relatively inelastic demand, but if it's a luxury, it will probably have relatively elastic demand. In other words, if the price of gas goes up, well, I still need it. Whereas if the price of Coca-Cola goes up, I don't need that. I could buy something else or not buy anything. Now, elasticity is also affected by how big a share of your budget that good eats up. And this actually is going to work in the opposite direction for the two goods I've chosen. Gas takes up a relatively large share of my budget compared to other things, so I really notice when the price changes. So since I notice when the price changes, I might take some steps to try to reduce my consumption of that thing. For example, I might not take a road trip that I planned on taking. So that would actually cause my demand for gasoline to be somewhat more elastic than it would otherwise be. Whereas for Coca-Cola, it doesn't take up a big share of my budget, so I might not even notice if the price changed that much. So just to recap for that one, if something takes up a large share of my budget, my demand for it is likely to be relatively elastic. Whereas if it doesn't take up much of my budget, I might not even notice or care if the price changes, so my demand is likely to be relatively inelastic. Finally, if the price goes up for something, then it's going to still maybe take me time to reduce my consumption of that thing, and gasoline is a good example of this. So if the price of gasoline goes up by 25%, say from $4 to $5 a gallon, well, I have the car that I have, I live where I live, and I have the job that I have, right? It's going to take time to change any of those things in order to decrease my consumption of gasoline. So in the short run, if the price of gasoline goes up, I probably won't move or change jobs or change cars, but in the long run, I can change those things. In the short run, demand for all goods, and really for certain goods especially, tends to be inelastic, whereas in the long run, demand for goods is elastic.